evidence from the apartment, and this was a major lead, because if they could connect the DNA to the right person, they might finally have a path to an arrest. So investigators worked through the potential suspects, and they compared samples, but one by one, the names were cleared. The DNA did not match the people they were looking at, and every time another possibility fell away, the case became all the more frustrating. And there was another problem too. The area around Carolyn's apartment.
There are only two ways someone disappears. Either they planned it, or something stopped them. Because people don't just vanish. Not in the middle of the day, not in their own neighborhood, and definitely not on a short walk. Most people want to believe the world makes sense, that when something terrible happens, there's a reason, a motive, a warning sign. But the cases that haunt us the most are the ones that defy that logic entirely. They begin as ordinary stories, routine commutes, lunch breaks, a walk to work. And then, without warning, they shatter into something so bizarre that even after the evidence is laid bare, the truth still feels almost impossible to accept.
And she was honorably discharged in 2008. But Maribel wasn't done. Her dream of becoming a police officer was still at the forefront. So after getting discharged from the Army, Maribel enrolled in California State University, Fullerton, and there she was studying criminal justice. She also got an apartment near the campus in Orange County. But at that time, her mom...
But some cases don't unfold that cleanly. They seem ordinary at first, until one detail changes everything. And some are so bizarre that even after the case is solved, the truth still feels almost impossible to accept. In 2026, we witnessed a collection of cases that defied every expectation. They weren't just crimes. They were puzzles where the pieces refused to fit. And at the center of each one, there was a moment, a single decision, a wrong turn, a door left unlocked that transformed an ordinary life into an unsolvable mystery. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to AA Dark Files, because we don't just cover the story.
Unsuspecting. But by morning, she was gone, without a trace. What followed was a chilling case of trust betrayed, secrets hiding in plain sight, and a truth far darker than anyone imagined. Maribel Ramos was a very headstrong and smart girl. She had
On a quiet night in May of 2013, a woman dropped off her rent payment and got ready for bed, ready to call it a night. She was caught on camera, calm, alone, and unsuspecting. But by morning, she was gone without a trace. Imagine the last image of your life being you, in sweatpants, dropping a check into a wooden box at 10:30 p.m. You look calm. You look unbothered. You look like someone who expects to wake up tomorrow. That was Maribel Ramos. She was a U.S. Army veteran with 2 combat tours under her belt. She was studying criminal justice. She was strong, smart, and capable. And she vanished from a locked apartment in Orange County, her car still parked, her pillowcase missing, and her bed unmade. A woman who was trained to survive didn't stand a chance against the person who was living in
spiraling. He was so deeply in love with the woman who had the literal definition of zero interest in him. It was heartbreaking on the surface, but soon it just turned creepy.
Maribel had been on Casey's back for the past few weeks now, demanding he pack his things and leave if he wasn't going to pay rent. And Paul even offered to come and help Maribel out if Casey was giving her any sort of trouble. The roommate was Kwang Choi Joy, known as Casey. He seemed like the perfect fit at first, easygoing, quiet, with a small dog. But that image was a lie. Casey wasn't just a roommate. He was obsessed. He had fallen in love with Maribel so intensely that he began morphing himself into the man he thought she wanted. He got tattoos, bought stylish clothes, spent thousands on plastic surgery. He showered her with expensive gifts and even made her the sole beneficiary of his $250,000 life insurance policy. But Maribel had a boyfriend, She had zero romantic interest in Casey, and when she gently rejected him, he didn't accept it. Instead, he simply tried harder. The soft rejection was met with silent desperation.
If only he could try harder and become the man that Maribel wanted him to be, then everything would fall into place, and he and Maribel would ride off into the sunset, living happily ever after. So Casey
Maribel seriously never saw Casey in that light. She genuinely thought she and Casey were just good friends, that's all. It was a classic friend zone situation. Well, when Maribel approached Casey and gently turned him down, he didn't put up a fight, but he did concoct a plan. But the tension wasn't just romantic. Casey stopped paying rent. He owed thousands of dollars, but had money for cosmetic surgery and tattoos. Maribel was done. She wanted him out. She told her boyfriend on speakerphone that she was going to kick Casey out. She made a 911 call 2 weeks before she vanished, desperate and afraid of her own roommate. She wanted the incident documented. She was scared enough to contemplate self-defense. The man who was supposed to be a safe presence had become a threat, and the threat was escalating.
Morph himself into the guys he thought Maribel would be into. He also started to shower Maribel with gifts, expensive ones, and even promised to take her on a cruise trip for the holidays. It was clear by this point, Casey was...
And on the call, you can tell she sounds scared and distressed. And to put it plainly, Maribel was scared of her roommate, Casey, and she wanted to have the whole occurrence documented. The police had their timeline. Maribel was last seen on surveillance dropping off her rent at 10:30 p.m. She went home. She was in her pajamas. She was expecting a normal night. But Casey was waiting. The police believe an argument broke out about the rent, and Maribel gave him an ultimatum, not just to leave at the end of the month, but to leave the next day. Casey snapped. The rejection, the financial pressure, the humiliation
carried on like any other morning. Then lunchtime came, and she left the office to make the roughly 6-mile drive back to her apartment. At first, nothing about that seemed strange. People leave for work for lunch all the time. But then lunch ended.
The police believe that when Maribel went to sleep, that was when Casey acted on his evil plan. We don't know what he did, but in the end, Maribel, who was more than capable of protecting herself from an ordinary attack, couldn't save herself. Then, the cover-up. Casey disposed of her body in a shallow grave in Silverado Canyon. He made a critical mistake. While the police had his laptop and phone, he used a public library computer to search for the timeline of decomposition. He dragged Google Maps to the exact spot where the body was buried. The police bugged the computer and watched in real time as he incriminated himself. They found the grave. They found Maribel.
Tissue extends down towards the spinal canal, usually because of an abnormality in the shape or the size of the skull. This can place serious pressure on the brain and spine. Now, it can also cause a plethora of awful symptoms, but it's unclear exactly how much this condition actually affected Carolyn day to day. But in 2008, she underwent surgery to treat it, and thankfully that surgery was a success. And 3 years later, she graduated from Ridge High School in 2011. After that, she enrolled in Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, where she earned a degree.
Basically, this little tweak allowed the officers to see Casey's computer screen in real time and what he was doing without getting caught. It sounds similar to screen sharing and how you can see someone working on their computer during digital meetings. But what the police were doing was some sneaky undercover incognito work. Now consider another case. Carolyn Bynington was 26 years old. She graduated with 3 degrees. She was a project manager at a company called Engine. She was loved, ambitious, and had her whole life ahead of her. On June 10, 2019, she left her office to go home for lunch. She drove the 6 miles back to her apartment, walked inside, and was murdered before she could even close the door. No forced entry, nothing was stolen. The attack was frenzied, involving multiple objects, and it happened in broad daylight. This was not a random break-in. This was targeted.
He wasn't being bothered by anyone after that time. And if he was getting picked on by someone, he didn't mention it to his parents, which would be kind of bizarre because they shared everything with one another. As of present, Jason Julkowski has still not been found, neither in the flesh nor his body. It's now been 2.5 decades since Jason walked out of his house to go to work an early shift, and he didn't reach Fazoli's. On top of that, he failed to return home. The investigators in Jason's case believe that foul play was almost certainly involved, but 25 years later, they still don't have any answers or suspects.
On June 10th of 2019, 26-year-old Carolyn Byrington walked into her home and unknowingly stepped into a nightmare that had been building for months. Because the danger waiting for Carolyn wasn't random. It wasn't a stranger watching from the street. It was someone close enough to know her routine. Close enough to know when she'd be back, and close enough to make sure she'd never leave. The timeline revealed the killer. A co-worker named Kenneth Sow left the...
Two brothers came forward and told the police that Craig had stopped them for speeding and had charged them at around 10 p.m. But when those records were checked, they showed that Craig had scratched off the original time and changed it to 9:20 p.m., giving him an alibi for that evening. It was all really weird. So the police had a strong enough reason to arrest Craig on suspicion. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly what they did. Craig Peyer was arrested on January.
Kenneth now had a way in, and using that copied key, he began going into her apartment during lunch breaks. And once inside, he installed hidden cameras throughout her home in multiple rooms, all so he could spy on her without her knowledge. But the motive was the most chilling part. Kenneth wasn't just a random coworker. He had been obsessed with Carolyn for months. He secretly copied her apartment keys and began entering her home during lunch breaks, installing hidden cameras in multiple rooms so he could watch her without her knowledge. On the day of the murder, Carolyn came home while Kenneth was inside her apartment, installing more cameras. He was caught red-handed. And instead of confessing, he attacked her. Carolyn's final moments were not a confrontation with a stranger. They were a confrontation with the secret that had been hiding in her own home. He found the love of his life, and he buried her in a shallow grave.
Zero clues as to where Crystal could have gone. The searches were unsuccessful, but they didn't stop. In the meantime, the police had Crystal's phone in their possession, and they decided to go through it. They thought that it might have some important information on it that could lead to some answers. And sure enough, there was one very peculiar detail that stood out almost instantly. It was a call from a number on Crystal's phone. We don't know when the call was made precisely, but this was the last call that came in before either Crystal stopped using her phone or it died. And it was from a man, but he was...
Kenneth made a mistake that exposed everything. He left work during lunch and went to Carolyn's apartment, apparently interested in installing more hidden cameras. He used that copied key to get inside just like he'd done before. But this time, Carolyn also decided she was coming home for lunch this day. Kenneth was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He even plotted with other inmates to stage a copycat crime to create reasonable doubt. It failed. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 55 years in prison. The case is a terrifying reminder that danger is often closer than we think, operating in the shadows of normalcy. He found the love of his life, and he buried her in a shallow grave.
Believable is that foul play was involved, and the culprit was the mysterious man who assaulted Crystal at that drum circle. The police considered the possibility of him being the same man who called her on the phone too, and he may have threatened her away from reporting him to the police. The police also believe that foul play was involved in Crystal's disappearance, and there are several people of interest, but as
Caroline's life ended because Kenneth did not want her to report what he had done. The man who sat in the same workplace as her, watched her from a distance, copied her keys, entered her home, and secretly recorded her, killed her when she discovered the truth. Then there is the case of Jason Julkowski, the man who simply evaporated. In June 2001, Jason was a 19-year-old living in Omaha, Nebraska.
He had a learning disability, but he was also a kind and helpful person, the type who would hang up the phone with friends to tuck his little brother into bed. One morning, he was called into an early shift at work. He planned to meet a coworker at Benson High School to carpool. The high school was only an 8-block walk from his home. He left at 10:45 a.m. He never arrived. His coworker waited. The police were called. For 10 days, the case was treated as a runaway, even though Jason left his paycheck, his car, and all his belongings behind. His family had to beg the police to search for him.